Happens when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones who destroy you. The floor was cold against my cheek, a mix of tile and dust pressed into my skin. My scalp burned where his fist had wrenched my hair, the sharp tug lingering like fire, like memory refusing to fade. I didn't scream. Not this time. Screaming only fueled him. Above me, my sister's laugh sliced through the air. It wasn't nervous, wasn't guilty. It was delighted. A performance. She clutched her phone like she was recording a sitcom moment, not her siblings sprawled on the floor. Pathetic, she hissed. Dad's breath came ragged, a storm he hadn't even tried to contain. You never listen. Always running your mouth. This is what you get. The doctor stepped in then. He wasn't family, just a neighbor who doubled as the town's only physician, visiting that evening after my mother muttered something about me being difficult again. He had come carrying a polite smile, the one men wear when they don't know the weight of the rooms they're about to enter. But when his eyes landed on me, on the red handprint blooming across my cheek, on the strands of hair still clenched in my father's fist, the smile fell. His hands hovered in the air as though he'd walked into the wrong script. His voice faltered, thin and raw. Then silence. He stared too long. Long enough to know. Long enough to make the truth impossible to unsee. My sister's laughter cut short. Dad straightened, trying to mask violence with charm, his voice oily. She's dramatic. Always has been. Kids these days, you know? She'll be fine. The doctor didn't nod. Didn't move closer. Instead, his gaze flicked to me, then to the phone in his pocket. His hand twitched, hovered, then made the choice. He pulled it out. For the first time in years, someone looked at my father not with fear, but with suspicion. The silence in the room shifted, thickened, like the house itself held its breath. Dad's voice cracked sharp. What the hell do you think you're doing? The doctor didn't flinch. His thumb slid across the glass. The faint glow lit his face, and I realized he wasn't calling family, wasn't calling a friend. His voice low, steady, he muttered into the receiver. Yes. I need to report suspected abuse. Immediate intervention required. Time slowed. My father's rage froze mid-step, balanced on the edge of denial and exposure. My sister's smirk faded, her world cracking under the weight of something she couldn't laugh away. And me, for the first time, flat on that cold floor, blood ringing in my ears, I felt something I had never associated with this house before. Hope. The room snapped into fragments after that. Dad's face twisted, confusion clashing with fury. He took a step forward, then stopped, like he suddenly remembered that fists couldn't erase a phone call once it left the air. My sister shifted uncomfortably, arms wrapping around herself as if she wanted to shrink into the wallpaper. The doctor's voice remained steady. Yes, a minor. Yes, she's bleeding. I'll stay until someone arrives. His eyes flicked down at me again, not pitying, not patronizing, just clear, clinical recognition. He knew exactly what he was seeing. Dad barked out a laugh, brittle. This is insane. You people think you know everything. She probably tripped. She's clumsy. But even he seemed to hear the hollowness in his own words. His hand still clutched strands of my hair, a cruel receipt of what had just happened. He let them fall finally, as if evidence might dissolve if he pretended hard enough. I pulled myself up slowly, legs trembling but spine straight. I'd learned over the years not to show weakness in front of him. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, there was a witness. My sister muttered, "You're making a scene, Dad," but her voice carried no conviction. For once, she wasn't the audience laughing along. She was scrambling, sensing that her usual role, the one where she played loyal sidekick to his cruelty, was shifting under her feet. The doctor crouched beside me, gently tilting my face toward the light without touching me. "You're safe," he whispered, too low for my father to hear. The words didn't feel real, not yet. Safe wasn't something I'd ever known in these walls. Then headlights cut across the curtains. A car door slammed. Heavy boots against the porch. My father's head snapped toward the window. His voice wavered. "You call the cops?" The doctor stood, taller than I'd noticed before, his presence filling the room in a way that rivaled my father's looming shadow. "I called someone who listens," he replied calmly. The front door opened without ceremony. Two officers stepped in, their radios crackling faintly, eyes sharp, movements brisk. My father puffed up, shouting about rights and lies and family discipline. But his words sounded like the hollow echoes of a man whose kingdom was already crumbling. I sat there, heart racing, as one officer gently asked for my name, my age, if I felt safe here. My throat tightened. For years, silence had been my armor. But now, silence was no longer mine to carry. "I don't feel safe," I whispered. And with those 4 words, the whole house shifted. The air felt different after I said it, like I had cracked a window in a room that had been suffocating me for years. The officer crouched low, his face softening in a way that contrasted against the rigid black of his uniform. "Thank you for telling us," he said, writing quickly. His pen scratched against the paper, each sound louder than my father's huffing, louder than my sister's shallow breathing. Dad slammed his fist against the wall. "She's lying. Always has been. She's ungrateful, spoiled. I give her a roof, food. This is how she repays me?" The other officer, taller and sterner, stepped between us. His voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. "Sir, we need you to calm down. Now." My sister's laugh, usually so sharp, came out cracked, broken. "It's not that serious. She probably hit herself. She does stuff like that." For attention. Her voice was shaking, the cracks showing through her rehearsed cruelty. The doctor turned his head slowly toward her, eyes narrowing. "Do you hear yourself?" His voice was quiet, but it hit harder than any shout. "You're describing something that doesn't make sense, and you know it." For the first time, my sister looked away. She didn't have a script for the scene. The officer nearest me asked again, "Has this happened before?" My mouth went dry. Words clung to my tongue like they feared sunlight. I thought about every bruise I'd hidden under sleeves, every excuse I'd made at school, every time I told myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. "Yes," I whispered finally. My voice cracked, but the word lingered in the air like smoke. "Many times." My father lurched forward, but the taller officer pressed him back with a firm arm. The doctor's phone was still in his hand, recording now, subtle, deliberate, undeniable. The younger officer looked at me again. "Would you like to come with us tonight? Somewhere safe." That word again. Safe. It felt foreign, like tasting sweetness after years of bitterness. I looked at my father, his face blotched red, veins pulsing in his neck. I looked at my sister, chewing her nails, eyes darting like a trapped animal. And I realized they were afraid. Not of me, but of something bigger. Of losing control. "I'll go," I said. My voice steadied this time. "I don't want to stay here." The officers exchanged a look, then nodded. One of them radioed in for backup, the static buzz filling the silence. My father sputtered, rage spilling from him in half-formed threats. But the walls no longer carried his voice the way they used to, because tonight, the walls were listening to me instead. The night air hit my skin like I'd been underwater for years and finally broke the surface. The officers guided me outside, their presence steady, but not suffocating. Behind me, the house buzzed with chaos, my father's shouts, my sister's whining protests, the doctor's quiet explanations that cut sharper than any blade. But out here, on the porch beneath a sky scattered with indifferent stars, there was something else. Space. Breathing room. One of the officers opened the back door of the patrol car, but not like in the movies. No shoving, no force. Just a quiet gesture, as if to say, "You're choosing this. This is yours." I slid inside. The seat was cold, the air thick with the scent of leather and static. The door closed gently, and for the first time in years, there was a barrier between me and my father's fists. Through the window, I saw him pacing, yelling, his hands flying in angry arcs. He looked smaller now, contained. My sister clung to him, but she wasn't laughing anymore. Her face was pale, eyes darting toward the flashing red and blue lights, painting the neighborhood awake. Curtains shifted in nearby houses. People were watching. His power wasn't private anymore. The car rumbled to life. As we pulled away, I caught the doctor's gaze. He stood on the porch, phone still in hand, chin lifted slightly, as if he knew he'd changed the trajectory of something bigger than tonight. He gave the smallest nod, not of pity, but of recognition. A witness who refused to be silent. The city blurred past, neon signs and darkened storefronts streaking across the glass. I pressed my forehead to the window, letting the vibrations steady me. My hands shook, but not from fear. From release. From possibility. At the station, the air smelled of coffee and paper. They didn't shove questions at me all at once. They asked gently, offered water, let me sit in a room where the clock ticked steady instead of my father's footsteps. They gave me forms, but more importantly, they gave me choice. Do you want to press charges? An officer asked. His tone wasn't loaded, not pushing. Just laying the path in front of me. I stared at the pen they set in front of me. It looked small, harmless. But tonight, it felt heavier than any weapon. My father had always controlled the story. But this was me taking the pen back. I wrapped my fingers around it. The ink bled onto the page, carving truth where silence once lived. And for the first time, I realized revenge didn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looked like ink. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnished wood and nerves. Weeks had blurred into a haze of paperwork, appointments, whispered conversations with people who kept calling me brave, even when I didn't feel it. But now, sitting here, my palms pressed against the cool wooden table, I understood something. Bravery wasn't about not shaking. It was about showing up, even when every muscle begged me to run. Across the aisle, my father sat in a suit that didn't fit right, shoulders too tight, anger simmering just below his forced calm. My sister perched beside him, her arms crossed, eyes hard. But the confidence she used to wear like armor was cracking. She glanced at the rows behind me, where neighbors and coworkers, people who had heard the whispers, seen the bruises, now filled the benches. The truth had spilled beyond our front door, and there was no stuffing it back inside. When I took the stand, the microphone's red light blinked like a heartbeat. The attorney's questions guided me gently, but my voice carried its own weight. I told the story. Not all at once, pieces, fragments like glass shards being set down carefully one by one. Every time my father tried to interrupt, the judge's gavel struck, sharp and final. He wasn't the authority here anymore. And then the doctor took the stand. He described what he saw that night, not just the physical, but the silence, the fear in the room, the way my sister laughed to mask it. His voice didn't tremble. It cut clean. It wasn't normal, he said firmly. It wasn't safe. And it wasn't the first time. I watched my father's jaw tighten, his face blotch red, the storm brewing with nowhere to land. My sister looked at her hands, twisting them in her lap. For once, she didn't laugh. When the ruling came, it wasn't cinematic. No booming declarations, no dramatic collapse. Just words on paper, signed and sealed, restraining orders, financial consequences, mandated counseling, custody shifts. But to me, those words were louder than any shout I had endured. Outside, cameras flashed, local news, curious reporters, neighbors pretending not to stare. My father shoved past them, face twisted, sister trailing behind. The crowd didn't part the way it used to for him. They looked at him differently now, not as a man of control, but as a man exposed. And me? I stood taller. The ink on the ruling wasn't just law. It was the first line of my story written without him. I didn't expect the fallout to spread so fast. At first, it was whispers. Neighbors lowering their voices when his name came up. The church pews he used to dominate now sat empty where he once stood, his voice silenced by absence. The man who strutted through every barbecue, every block party, with a drink in one hand and insults in the other, gone. But then, the whispers turned into stories. The bruises people had noticed on me, the sudden weight loss, the hollowed-out look in my eyes when I used to show up at family events. Nobody said anything then, but now they were saying it all, and they were saying it out loud. My sister tried to step into his shoes, parading herself online as the loyal daughter defending her wrongly accused father. She posted smiling pictures, perfect captions. But screenshots don't erase history. People dug up old memories, old patterns. They remembered the way she laughed when I flinched, how she treated cruelty like entertainment. The comments didn't side with her. They sided with the truth. One night, scrolling through my phone, I stumbled across a video someone had uploaded from the courthouse steps. It was me, walking out with my lawyer, my face pale but lifted, shoulders squared. The caption read, "She chose silence for years. Tonight, she chose herself."
It spread.
Shared, reshared, dissected. Suddenly, my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was fuel. Women I'd never met sent messages. I left too. I pressed charges because of you. I didn't realize I wasn't alone until I read this. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had always thrived on control, on keeping me small and voiceless. Now, the very act of me speaking, even in broken, trembling fragments, had turned into something bigger than him. Something louder. The best revenge wasn't that he was losing jobs, losing friends, losing the respect he'd hoarded like a dragon sitting on gold. It was that his name, the one he forced me to carry, the one he barked whenever I didn't move fast enough, was no longer feared. It was pitted.
Mocked. Exposed.
And my sister? The laughter she once weaponized was being turned against her. Not cruelly, not with fists or shoves, but with the undeniable glare of public truth. Some nights, I still woke up shaking. But then I'd remember the flood of messages, the headlines, the doctor's steady testimony, the pen scratching across that first police report. Each piece was part of something larger, a mosaic of justice. For the first time, revenge didn't feel like a secret I carried alone. It felt like a fire everyone else helped me keep alive. The city's annual community awards ceremony wasn't supposed to matter to me. But when the invitation came, addressed to me, not them, I felt the universe had stitched something together on my behalf. The event honored resilience, advocacy, survival. The same community that once looked the other way now wanted to hand me a microphone. I almost said no. The thought of standing under those hot lights, of faces staring, judging, recording on their phones, it made my stomach churn. But then I remembered every slammed door, every insult disguised as family wisdom, every bruise hidden under sleeves. I thought of my father's rage, my sister's laughter, and I said yes. The night arrived. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but strong. Clean lines, no frills. My hair pulled back, not as a victim, but as someone who no longer hid her face. As I walked to the stage, I spotted them in the back. My father, stiff as stone, my sister clinging to his arm like a lifeline. They weren't invited, but of course they came. His ego wouldn't let him stay away. He needed to see if I'd still tremble. The host handed me the plaque. Applause filled the room. Loud, unapologetic. And then they passed me the microphone. For a moment, silence stretched. My palms slicked with sweat. But then I spoke. Not with rehearsed lines or practice speeches. Just truth. I was taught that silence keeps peace. That speaking up would destroy the family. But silence nearly destroyed me. Tonight, I'm here because I stopped being quiet. The crowd leaned in. Cameras blinked red, recording. I felt his eyes on me, burning holes. But I didn't flinch. I told them about the doctor, the courtroom. The whispers turned into voices. I didn't mention his name. I didn't need to. The story itself painted him clear enough. And then I looked directly at the back of the room, straight through him, and said, "Abuse doesn't end when the bruises fade. It ends when we stop protecting it." The room erupted. Standing ovation. My father's face twisted, not in control, not in dominance, but in helpless rage. My sister shrank beside him, the laughter gone. It was poetic. He couldn't shout me down. He couldn't slam a door. He couldn't silence the applause. That night, the revenge wasn't in the award, or even the speech. It was in watching him sit there, forced to listen, stripped of power, while my truth filled the air like thunder. After the ceremony, I stepped outside into the cool night air. Applause still echoed faintly from the hall, but out here, everything was quiet. The kind of quiet I used to fear. The kind I now carried like armor. I spotted them again, my father and sister lingering by the parking lot, shadows under the streetlight. He looked smaller, his shoulders hunched, his face strained. She tugged at her phone, pretending to scroll, but her eyes flickered nervously toward me. For a moment, I just stood there. No words. No need to approach. I realized they were waiting for me to come running back, begging for acknowledgement, for forgiveness, for some false reunion. But I didn't move. Instead, people began to pour out behind me. Strangers, neighbors, even reporters. They congratulated me, shook my hand, asked for quotes. Cameras flashed. My father had to watch as I became the center of attention, not as his daughter, not as his burden, but as my own person. That was the final strike. He could live with courtrooms. He could live with whispers. But public irrelevance? Being forgotten while I rose higher? That was unbearable. I turned once, just enough for him to see the calm on my face. Not anger, not fear, just peace. Then I walked away. Months passed. He tried to call. My sister sent messages, guilt-laced, frantic. I didn't block them. I didn't reply either. Their words sat unread, stacking higher and higher, until my silence became its own kind of sentence. Poetic revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't destructive. It was absence. The absence of my compliance, my suffering, my silence. The absence of the control they once fed on. And life, in its quiet way, kept unfolding for me. I moved into a new apartment. White walls, wide windows, sunlight spilling in. I kept the award on a small shelf, not as a trophy but as a reminder. Survival is louder than abuse. One morning, I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city stir awake. My phone buzzed with another desperate text. I turned it face down, smiled softly, and whispered to myself, "What happens when silence is louder than revenge?" I finally knew the answer. It happens now. In every breath I take without fear. In every step forward. In every moment they sit in their own shadows, waiting for a response that will never come. The final act of revenge wasn't fire or fury. It was living fully, while leaving them behind in the ruins they built for themselves. And that was completed.